We tend to repurpose data that wasn't created with one idea or objective and reuse it in a completely different one. And that will tend to misuse if you're not doing the right questions.
Are you a fitness-loving foodie? Then Defy Snacks is for you. Defy offers real, high-quality chocolate you love, combined with functional ingredients, giving you as much as 26 grams of protein per bag, so you can be both a little bit bad and a little bit good at the same time. As a female-owned brand, Defy dedicates a portion of its profits to other women-owned businesses. Currently sold in the US, you can find us on snacks.com and follow us on social at Defy Snacks.
Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, the creative effectiveness ad tech platform. And this is a podcast about the future of data-driven marketing. Every week or so, I have the privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders. And this week is no different. I'm very lucky to be in Mexico City with Aurea Mauries, who is Strategic Marketing and Technology Leader, Animal Nutrition Mexico at Cargill. So Aurea, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, could you give us a brief background?
Sure. So Cargill has a lot of enterprises. Mine is the Animal Nutrition Enterprise. We have a business in Mexico that offers nutrition solutions for animal owners or animal producers within the country. We, as a team, designed a portfolio and the value propositions for the new solutions in nutrition for those animals here in Mexico.
And how did you get to that job?
So my major is in animal production. I've worked a lot in sales and marketing and sales enablement for a long time, especially in the animal health space. I got here, I'm a pandemic recruit, so they recruited me during pandemics through LinkedIn. And I was excited to learn about a new job with the same animals, the same customers, but in a completely different space. And it has been a great journey ever since.
And so what new belief or behaviour has changed your work life, your career in the last 5 years or so?
So, pandemic, I think, hit a great vein around what's really life about. I was coming out from I was in a global role, but I was coming out from a long journey kind of approach, going back home and, sitting yourself all alone and having to deal with a lot of virtual relations that were not the common. And the two things that set me back was what I had forgotten about what's out besides work. How do you reconnect about the world around you in a completely different state? Now you're not traveling, you're not seeing people, your label is not the one that identifies you. So how do you get that grip of identity without being that traveling solo all the time? And grounding myself into that, it has been a lot about reconnecting with the security of the world beside your job, the people and the relations beside seeing them. And from there, a huge new way of reconnecting to the world that changed my mind and changed my life and actually drives a lot of how to go back to the center within my work.
And so what has happened now that you've done that? So you've reconnected with the world outside of work.
Yeah.
So how's that affected your work? What has happened to change your perspective on your career?
I'd say two things. One, it's become even easier now to bring what we call the outside in. So bringing the outside in regarding not only competitors or the customers, but other industries, other practices that probably you think are completely disconnected. I'm seeing here a work of art and, even sitting down and understanding how art can play into your work life can be interesting, or, zoos, circuses, entertainment whatsoever can really dawn into how your innovation processes and business models can align into different perspective and inspiration. And the other side would be relations. Sometimes you are too tied up into relations and discussions within work that you forget the personal side of people or how to address it in a different way. And bringing the outside in, it's also, acknowledging that somebody might have an interest on fashion or plants or something different that can reconnect and revamp that discussion in a completely different way.
So moving on, what would your advice be to become a better data-driven marketing person?
So I'm going to share a story myself. And this is a professional secret, I did fail statistics when I was in college. That was the one, subject that I wasn't good at. We were more into experimental design and everything, and I wasn't understanding a bit of it. So going back through life and going into marketing, I had to go back into really, really going deep into understanding data. Especially, we do a lot of animal science, so we do need a lot of statistics. So regrounding myself and relearning myself into that would be the basics, understand what really data is there. Basics, representation, reach, biases, outliers. I know they are really basics, but sometimes we tend to forget and get lost into flashy graphs or flashy data that can pinpoint, and you need to regroup into what's really that universe and what are we trying to do. Second, this is a lesson I learned in MBA. In the MBA, people are usually behind data transformation or data interpretation. So you can't walk away from what's really driving that data conclusion. So you need to be really into understanding the numbers, but figuring out what's really the underlying piece of it and who is really targeting and what was really need to address. Because we tend, at least in my experience, we tend to repurpose data that wasn't created with one idea or objective and reuse it in a completely different one. And that will tend to misuse if you're not doing the right questions.
So something that's on my mind at the minute is there's a fascination with data, right? Because it's clean, it's nice.
Yes.
You can put it in a spreadsheet and it all adds up. And
everything will match. Yeah.
However, data is a record of something that happened.
Exactly.
Not the thing that happened, but something that happened. But in reality, brands need more than records of things. They need to have an understanding. So in your experience, what is the best way to move from data to understanding?
So I think you can do it in different ways, but the first one is understand what hypothesis is data showing up, I don't know. People will buy chocolate in the end of the month. Let's say that, right? That's data, sales spike. But what's really behind it? Is it that they are celebrating the end of the month? We have more birthdays. There's more anniversaries. What's really driving that? Those are the questions. And you will be able to hypothesize into some level, but then you will need out to see and validate. It's not only, and I tend to use this word of not making the Excel or the decisions based only on sheets or spreadsheets. You need to go outside and really match it to reality.
Yeah, it's like someone said to me in some research I was doing that you can't get to know a customer through PowerPoint. Never.
Ever.
So we're going to move on now to your shiny new object, which is completely new for this podcast. And it's an organization called Heart Math. HEARTMATH. What is that? And why is that organization your shiny new object that you think represents the future of data-driven marketing?
Okay, so it's quite a long-fetched tool for me. Heart Math is a research institute that's been working on science to show what's really the connection of neuroscience with intuition, emotions, and how they play in our life. Completely different. It's not a marketing driven or anything driven through marketing. But what it really shows me, and when I look at the research, is going into data, they really show up with crisp information around questions that we had never asked, scientifically proven. Does intuition exist? How do we make decisions? Do we know what we decide even before thinking about it, right? So for me, it's a golden nugget around human behavior. We as marketers tend to understand and try to understand human behavior in the perspective of shoppers, and really, dig deeper into what are our motivations and how will they show up. So for me, it's a completely disruptive literature research, but in a completely different way on emotions, which is more of, we know that consumers are working with emotions and how we make decisions. And sometimes it takes the myth of pure rationality into things.
So someone such as myself that's never come across this organization and their research and their provocative insights, can you share some of that stuff? Like what do you know that a lot of marketers won't know now that you've investigated their research?
So that's a tough one. The first thing, do you believe in intuition in a way that you can prove it as driven decisions made by intuition, or decisions driven?
Believe in intuition?
Yeah, do you?
You're asking me a question?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I probably don't believe in intuition. I think it is a nice word that encompasses in a vague way how you have processed inputs or data from the outside world. And you have, like, people call it gut feel, but really as a human being, you've processed inputs and your output is an opinion, and people call it intuition. And I think it sounds quite romantic. It's quite nice.
Okay.
But in actual fact, like, I don't know, if you... I'm going to come up with a completely stupid example here, but if like you're walking through the forest and you see 10 reindeer run by, intuition might be the next one would be red, right? But really for me, all you've done is you've taken on data
and processed it.
And obviously that's a stupid example, but in a sales scenario in business, I've sat across thousands of people in these meetings and I have an intuition, but really it's just my brain processing all of those tangible, intangible inputs in order for me to have a feeling about what will happen next. But poets would call it intuition. I just think it's processing.
So the first one would be, we tend to think that the brain is the one that's data processing, and then we make assumptions or we react or make conclusions. What they have proven is that the first filter, it's not the neurological connections within the brain. And probably hard math will kill me because I don't represent science well, but for me the basic nugget is we do tend to pre-conclude, and that pre-conclusion, it's not rational or cerebral, but it's more around what has been our previous experience and the imprint within emotions before even going into rational thought. So we are already driving into that. So yeah, intuition in a romantic way might be what you're saying, but they are going more deeper into how previous relations, previous experiences, previous reactions, and previous emotions are driving the way of our thought. Make sense?
And it makes sense. I'm struggling a bit because it's
completely into a different side. Yeah,
but being honest. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. If we are choosing a partner, or I don't know, the holiday or a restaurant or something, how does the data within HeartMath give us insight into the difference between something that's like low consideration versus like what washing powder I'm going to buy, for example? Because are people buying a washing powder emotionally, or are they in the supermarket and it's got 50% off? So I'm open to learning much more about this.
So let's take that example and try to deep dive. I probably won't convince you, but this is something that's helped me, So do you go exactly in the same mood to buy this powder on a weekend after you forgot and they kicked you out of your house because you didn't bring it? Are you taking the decision because it has some imprint around every time I go to buy that powder, something happens? And sometimes you are not even connecting that, but you are within yourself without noticing. We called it sometimes unconscious, we called it bias, whatever, but it's actually something that's our more connections that are really being science proven. So for me, it's uncovered a different layer about human behavior as a whole and marketeer as a human behavior and driving consumer experiences in the basics. Make sense?
And can you give me an example of how you've used this?
So I'll give you one from the past because some of them I can't disclose right now, but from the past, a lot around, we were working into immune therapy for an animal, for a species in a productive animal health space. And what we were seeing was all these bets driving into science, what really happening with science, immunoscience, and how we're doing and everything. But what we weren't understanding was their own concept of disease, what it makes for the animal and what caused them to see the disease in the animals, right? So you needed to trigger, and if you were science-based only, the only things that we would get from them was, it's not worth the treatment, it's not worth the payment, right? That's what you were getting, and you weren't going to be able to introduce it. But if you walked away from that and really understand what was the disease generation around them and what it meant for them, the prevalence of that disease in their facilities, it completely drove a different conversation. Everybody walked away from that emotional conversation at the time because they weren't used to it. I'm a sales rep. I sell high-tech pharma products, and I need to sit down with the vet and understand how he feels about this. It's completely crazy, But once we understood that if you were talking about disease, how they were reacting at that moment in the animal, the life stage of the animal, it opened to them a completely different space into conversations, how to relate with them and really make the product successful.
So if you're going to advise someone practically how to use this service, how would you advise them? So say, for example, a friend of yours or in a different market or a different vertical was like, oh, that sounds interesting. What do you do? How do you approach this organization in a way that gives a practical benefit to a marketer?
So the way I advise them would be, first of it, working it for yourself. It's going to drive a complete different way of thought for you and how to you reground in your line of thinking. Secondly, when you bring it to the team, especially for ideation, provide these nuggets of knowledge around behavior so that it triggers a different thought of motivation for your customer, your targets, whatever you're trying to solve within the different customer experience or customer funneling that you're working on. That would be my biggest advice on it.
But when you arrive on the website, what do you do? How does it work?
So there's a lot of resources. I'm a subscriber, I'm using it. But if you go into the top line, you have research. If you go for research, try to drive a lot into human behavior and start from there, Don't read through the full papers. You're going to go crazy if you're not familiar with peer-reviewed journals, but go for the abstract and the conclusion, and work into that a little bit more, and you will see it applicable.
And can you search within the tool? So you go in and you say, right, I don't know, I'm selling
emotions.
But if I wanted to sell a soft drink, for example, how would that work? Or is it would you go find research on what emotions drive attention, or
probably more into emotions and attention. How do we handle different emotions, low vibration emotions versus high emotions? What are there? Probably you'd go there. Yeah.
So it's an extensive resource of peer-reviewed papers, and it's going to require some dedication.
Yeah, it's gonna require for you to deep dicker, but don't go into details. Don't go into that.
They haven't made it too easy. But if you say you need to kind of take a walk around the organization and say, oh, that could be relevant for me.
Yeah, and if not, there are some two cool books. One is, I can't remember the names.
We can share it in the...
But I'll share it in the link. But there are cool books around how really... It's called heart math because what it does, it's drive into the rational about heart. So yeah, I'll send you the two titles of the books for sure.
And what's the most surprising thing that you've got from heart math?
That won't relate to marketing directly, but...
Go on, indulge me.
So there's a lot of, it's going a little bit into, at least I won't call it mainstream, but it's coming up a lot more now into my feed. It's more around nature and how trees communicate, which is a completely different approach into communication. I don't know if you've heard it, but all the roots and everything within the underground life about it, and how really, and it's put me more into understanding that communication, it can come through in so many different ways that we haven't even uncovered all of the dimensions.
Well, look, unfortunately, we're at the end of the podcast now.
No
So if someone wants to get in touch with you about anything, trees,
hard math, animals, whatever.
Yeah, bringing the outside in, or how to fail at statistics. Where would you like them to get in touch, and what makes a message that you'll actually respond to?
So you can reach to me through LinkedIn. I'm active there, and I'll certainly see the messages or the posts. I'm as Aurea Mauries, so it's easy to find. And the last message, I think data has been showing us for a long while in marketing that it can really show us to uncover different insights and needs, but don't walk away to only see it through, as you say, the PowerPoint. You need to be outside and really try to see it and observe and understand what's not being said within it, and from there act.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for the invitation.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.